Hi, this is Scott Monty. I have an important message, and I need your help. Now, don't press the skip button. I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is a public podcast. What does that mean? Well, it means we need your support to bring you the show. We aim to introduce new names to you or to let you hear from old familiar voices in a new way. Like Nicholas Meyer, who told us he turned down a BSI dinner invitation because he couldn't bring his girlfriend. And Maria Konnikova, who took her knowledge of thinking like Sherlock Holmes and con men and turned her skills to the World Series of Poker. And Bert Coules, who admired Nigel Bruce for many things, but his portrayal of Dr. Watson was not one of them. But we can't make a show like this without your help. Shows like I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere and Trifles run on the honor system. We produce the show and give it to you, and we ask, ever so nicely, if you'll send us some money. And listeners like you do. It's hard to ask, but we can't do it any other way. All you have to do is commit to a monthly donation of $10 before July 31st, and we'll send you a Trifles or iHose mug. And if you commit to $20 a month, we'll send you a heavy-duty tote bag. Or maybe a different level of support is right for you. Just go to ihearofsherlock.com or SherlockHolmesPodcast.com and click on that orange Support on Patreon button to see the giving levels and the gifts we'll give you if you choose to support us for the remainder of 2019. As always, I'm grateful for your time and your generosity.
Support for this episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is made possible by the Wessex Press, the premier publisher of books about Sherlock Holmes and his world. Find them online at wessexpress.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 171, John Bennett Shaw.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became a chronicler.
In a world where it's always 1895, comes I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we discuss goings-on in the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, the Baker Street irregulars, and popular culture related to the great detective.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
And welcome once again to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And we are going to be extra thorough in this interview because it's about John Bennett Shaw. And we all know that John Bennett Shaw himself was very thorough, and you have to be thorough when you go by three names. Arthur Conan Doyle. There's a good example right there.
Yeah, I wonder whatever happened to him.
He's holding a great seance in the sky right now. Well, you know, interesting that we should mention Arthur Conan Doyle because July 7th marks the anniversary of his death on that date in 1930. So he's been gone from these mortal coils for some, 89 years now?
Yep. 11 years from now, we can have a centenary of his passing.
Oh, that'll be good. Wow. Well, start getting those chairs and tables arranged for the seance, if you will. Well, if you would like the show notes for this episode, it is available at ihose.co/ihose171. We are I Hear of Sherlock on all of the socials. You can reach us via email at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. And, of course, visit our website, ihearofsherlock.com, where you can help support us. You can do some archival research, go through some of our old episodes, our old articles there. You can sign up to get email updates automatically. And, of course, you can leave comments there as well. We're available on pretty much any audio podcatching device, wherever you're listening to us now. Just make sure you're signed up to get us again and again. We come out the 15th and 30th of every month. We are pleased to welcome Jim Hawkins to the show. Jim has been a Sherlockian for decades. He is a retired Southwest Airlines employee, which is always, well, kind of nuts. He has been in Nashville since 1985, where he's been a very involved member and leader of the Nashville Scholars of the Three-Pipe Problem. Jim is responsible for their website, their newsletter, and the online group Welcome Holmes, as well as the project that we are here to talk with him about today. Jim, welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Thank you so much, Scott and Bert. And I am just delighted that you set this up. You know, I'm really pleased. This makes me very happy.
Well, we felt like we needed to get another dose of Nashville hot Sherlockians, and Bill Mason provided some of that a few episodes ago. And well, you're a nice second course, as it were.
Yeah, and actually, Chris Schweizer is one of our members. Right. He and I held forth at our last meeting. We did a couple of things. He does the quiz, and I did the background. So,
oh, that's right. Yeah,
we're thrilled.
That's great. Nashville coming on hot. Well,
absolutely.
Jim, how did you first get started with Sherlock Holmes?
You know, at almost 75 years of age, I don't remember reading Sherlock Holmes early on. What I do remember is for my 40th birthday, my first wife, my wife now calls herself the current Mrs. Hawkins, my first wife gave me the Baring-Gould annotated Sherlock Holmes. And I think a lot of Sherlockians have come to Holmes through that. And that's where I actually started reading Holmes. I'd seen a movie here and there, but I was not really into the fold. I was not hooked yet, you know. So that's where I met Holmes and all the rest of it.
It's not a bad place. And I don't know if you've heard, but this year's Baker Street Journal Christmas Annual is going to be all about Baring-Gould's annotated Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, wow. So wow, that's great.
It'll bring back memories.
That's where I also met John Shaw. Not met him, but heard about him. And I couldn't really believe it. People in New York City were dressing up like Holmes and meeting and carrying on like crazed people. I don't know, drinking a lot. So I said, this is a group I need to look into.
And when did you first make a connection with those people, with the Scion Society, with an actual meeting?
Actually, I started a Scion in Norman called the Norman Nerudas in about 1984, I believe. And in 85, I had to leave town. No, actually, I got a job in Nashville. So I left Norman, Oklahoma, came to Nashville. I was a music consultant for the Baptist churches in the United States. So I got to travel a lot, and part of my assignment was New Mexico, and part of that assignment was our conference center, which we no longer have, but it was outside of Santa Fe. So we had already contacted John Shaw by writing him. My wife wrote him and said, I need a Sherlockian gift. What would you suggest? And he came up with these bookends. I still have them in my bookcase over here, Holmes and Watson. It's just little wooden figures, you know, but they do back up some books. And that's the first time I ever contacted John Shaw. And then he told me about the science, and there's a letter introducing me to the Nashville Scholars. I didn't know about them either. So he's been at the forefront of my Sherlockian connections all these years.
Now, before we ask you a little bit more about that, what does a music consultant for the Baptist Church do? What were you doing?
Well, in those days, we no longer have an education wing. It's completely changed. That's pretty much why I left in 97. But I was going to a region, all the western states. Each state or a couple of states together had a person in charge of facilitating the music directors in Baptist churches, either with music or with workshops, education. A lot of guys in our churches, small churches, were a dentist or a cell phone salesperson or something, but they did the music on the weekend. And so we devised training materials for them to learn how to be a good musician, and that's what I did. It also included Alaska and Hawaii, which I had to make a trip to every year. It was great, but that's what I did. I also did the youth music conferences, senior adult music conferences. We had 2 conference centers, one in North Carolina, it's called Ridgecrest, and we had one out of Santa Fe called Glorietta. And I facilitated those with teachers and choirs and all that kind of thing. So I did that for almost 15 years. It was great.
Wow.
So you must have a strong music background. I gather you must play the piano. Well,
I'm a singer, really, and conductor. I'm like Robert Shaw. I can't find the notes on the piano, but I can hear it in my head. So I did go to Eastman in New York, in Rochester, New York. I finished with a master's degree at Eastman. From there, the Army decided they had given me enough time off, so I had to get into the Army, 1969. This is the Vietnam era. And luckily made the audition for the U.S. Army Chorus and got to spend my time in Washington, D.C., singing with this musical group.
Wow. So as you traveled... you traveled around to these various locations, did you... First of all, I love the idea of the Norman Nerudas. What a great name. Yeah. But... and what a musical connection there, too. But did you ever have any time to meet Sherlockians as you were traveling around, other than John Shaw?
Oh, yes, I did. I met the group in Denver, which is one of my favorite names, Dr. Watson's Neglected Patients. I love that group. And, different other groups around the country. I was not aware of a lot of Scion work at that time, though, so my main focus was not on Sherlock Holmes. It was just a bookstore where I met some Sherlockians, In fact, Nicholas Potter Books in Santa Fe, for which I did a little bit of a website for him one time, he became a very good friend, and that's where Shaw came into the store and bought books now and then from Nick Potter. Nick Potter just finally retired, I think, last year, but it was a wonderful time. Every time I was in Santa Fe, I'd go to his bookstore. He would give me a book, and, it was great.
That's wonderful. So let's chat a little bit about John Bennett Shaw. This is one of the icons in the Sherlockian world, and we recently spoke with Ray Betzner, particularly about Vincent Starrett, who was again one of the shining lights. If you think of the Sherlockian world in terms of eras, Vincent Starrett came from that golden era of Sherlockians, and you could say that people like Peter Blau and John Bennett Shaw were part of the silver era. What? How did you first discover John, and what did you find out about him?
Well, as I say, I noticed his name in the Baring-Gould annotated Sherlock Holmes. I also used to hear him on NPR. When the BSI weekend was going on, they always went to John. He had, great sound bites for the meetings and things like that. And I heard him several times on that. I said, I really need to get to meet this guy. I'm one who will seek out someone that I really admire or have an affinity for, And so I wrote him and I said, look, I'm going to be in Santa Fe with my work, and I wonder if I could come by and visit. He said, absolutely. So he invited me to the house. Our music weeks at Glorietta outside of Santa Fe lasted a week, and then we had another week following that, but we had the weekend off. So Saturday mornings, I would go to John Shaw's house, 1917 Fort Union Drive, take my children. Dorothy Shaw would take the kids into the kitchen and they would bake cookies, and John and I would visit, and I always left with a book in my hand.
Wonderful.
He always gave his books away, so he became a good friend, but I didn't know him as closely as a lot of folks did, the people in the Brothers 3 of Moriarty. But I did get to visit with him a couple of times a year. I was also out there in the fall for the senior adult retreat at this same place, and I would go see him. So I was just amazed with him. And here's a guy, there's no internet, there's no computer. He is doing this on his typewriter, and I'm sitting there looking at his desk stacked high with letters. Said, where are all these letters going? He said, all over the world. I write about 15 a week, sometimes 30 a week, and they go to all over the world. So, but he, the thing that I have heard from Stephen Doyle and Ray Betzner is that John Shaw never talked down to anybody. He was not the great Sherlockian scholar, and poor, pitiful you don't know anything about Sherlock Holmes. He never went there. He was always, you need to get into this. This is where you belong. You will love this. He's a great encourager, So I just have never forgot him, and neither has anyone else that I've ever talked to about him. So on the website and all that, maybe we don't need to go there just yet, but that's where it all came from, my admiration for him. Yeah.
Well, I've heard him described as the Johnny Appleseed of the Sherlock Holmes movement. Just as you say, encouraging people everywhere he went. I've heard of him as a monumental collector, and we've mentioned his collection before on this show. It was a large part of what is now the Sherlock Holmes collection at the University of Minnesota Libraries. And of course, the Norwegian Explorers Conference is coming up hot and fast. We did an episode with them. And I know Shaw did a number of events up there. And he was noted to have basically one of everything, if not more than one of everything.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us what it was like, not only, meeting him in person for the first time, but stepping into his legendary library with his collection. What was that like for you?
It was breathtaking. I mean, you couldn't believe it. And not only did he have all these books lined up, but he had this ephemera. He had posters and pictures, and his toilet seat had Moriarty on it, and on and on. I mean, seriously, he had chocolate Sherlock Holmes in the refrigerator, And but let me mention that on the website, on the website, there's a link to a movie that a guy named Steve Robinson, who has an online bookstore, Wolf Mountain Books, lives in Flagstaff, Arizona. Steve decided to join us at the Friends of John Bennett Shaw and sent in an hour and 37-minute movie that he took of being in the library and visiting with Shaw. It's the best example I have ever seen of actually being in that room and see John talk about his books. He had a story about every book that he had, And it was so funny because when he went into the room with Steve Robinson and his two other friends, he said, now, 60% of my books are behind other books. You don't see them. He said, it's embarrassing. It's like a harem, but I just can't stop it. They just keep coming my way. So you never know when he was going to come up with a zinger for you. But being in that room, first of all, you didn't dare walk into the room unless he told the dogs to back off because they would eat you alive. There was a big one and a little one, and they didn't want you in there unless John said it was fine, and then you were good. But he did have story after story after story, and I never got tired of his stories. So you're sitting there with books, he'd reach up and grab one. He said, now this one right here, blah, blah, blah. It was wonderful.
That's great. So let's talk about the website. You created johnbennettshaw.com, which I was a little surprised that domain was available, quite frankly.
Oh, was I? Yeah. I could not believe it. I said, whoa, surely somebody would have bought this up and, charge you $1 million to buy it from them. But no, it was available.
Or at least $221, right?
Yeah, right.
So when did you first get a sense that you wanted to do some kind of online tribute?
Well, I mentioned the neglected patients of Dr. Watson in Denver. I met a friend through Welcome Holmes. His name is Ron Lees.
No.
He is in some of these pictures on the website. He was going to see Shaw in Albuquerque from Denver about the same time I was, but we never met. So we finally met on Welcome Holmes. I would have Denver overnights, and so he and I and his wife, Mary, would get together for dinner. And we decided we would call ourselves the Brothers in Shaw. So I said, we need to honor Shaw somehow. We need a website or something because people that were in his day are beginning to die off. These young people don't know who he was, and they're asking about him. So when I retired, I had a web design business for a while before I went with Southwest Airlines. But I decided to do a Facebook page on Shaw.
Okay.
And I started writing people, and they started sending things in, letters, and Tim Johnson was one of the key people that said, you are welcome to anything we have in the library at the University of Minnesota. Oh, wow. And if you want to put it out there where people can see it. See, Bill Mason and I here in Nashville had talked before about, Shaw's, all his stuff's in Minneapolis, but it's hard to get to. I mean, it's buried in a vault. It's not out where you can really see it. You have to sign up for a tour to go see just a little bit of it. And I kept thinking, people need to see some of this. It's amazing. So through the Facebook page, I was able to gather all these materials, and people like Susan Rice would say, I don't do Facebook. Can you put it out there where we can see it? And a lot of that age group doesn't do Facebook. They don't want to even get on it. So I said, okay, we'll do a website. And that's pretty much where it all came from. But it was just great fun.
So, Jim, when you think about some of these materials that you put out there from the university or things that John collected, what are a couple of items that you think are just really resonant or unique to John, or give you an insight about John, or maybe come with a story of John's you might remember?
I remember seeing his car tag for New Mexico, Sherlock, Sherlok. And he would drive around New Mexico and get people talking about him. He put a big sign up, 221B Baker Street, out in his front yard. That sign is on the website. It's also in Minneapolis. So people in the neighborhood would say, "What is this? Who is that?" Blah, blah, blah. And he began to be known as the local Sherlock Holmes guy. So those are a couple of the items that I enjoyed. I need to mention 2 books that are available to everyone. The Baker Street Journal, December 1990, is all about John Shaw. Mm-hmm. Philip Schreffler edited that. And on the inside cover, where you normally see the Sherlock Holmes drawing, you see John Bennett Shaw's profile. And I think that's only been done maybe one or two other times. So that is a great piece to learn about Shaw and what all he did. And the other is a little pamphlet called The Sage of Santa Fe, put together in 2013 by Susan Rice and Vinnie Brosnan, both BSI folks. That's a little harder to find, but it's marvelous. So actually, I'm going to be at the event, the Norwegian Explorers event in August. I'm going to go up a couple of days early and take as many pictures of things that I want to put out there as I can. I must say that the University of Minnesota has been doing a great job of making available pictures of other Sherlockians, John at meetings, papers and all that kind of thing. But they have recently upgraded their website, and it's so much better than it was when I started back in August of 2018. To pull up a picture and to download it and then, put it in Photoshop and bring it up. But there's so much there. I mean, when they opened the library, Shaw had 12,000 books that went into the library, and Lord knows how much of the other kinds of things that were there. One really quick story about young Sherlock Holmes. John told me that Spielberg had sent him a script. He said, "I want you to go over this and see if we can actually pull a story of Sherlock Holmes. Is it too weird? It's got some crazy stuff in it. How Sherlockian really is it?" And John went through that and sent it back. Said, "Yeah, you could do a movie on this." And so when Young Sherlock Holmes came out, I think it was, 19. I hate to say because I'm not sure.
It was 85, I think.
But 85?
Yeah.
Great, I think that's right. They had a wonderful poster of it. And when we went to the show in Oklahoma and came back out to visit Shaw, I had one of those posters. And he was thrilled to have that. So my son and I, Travis and I, gave it to him at his home. And in 2002, I wrote this all up for the Sherlock Holmes Collections newsletter, Friends of the Sherlock Holmes Collections. Julia McCurris asked me to write that, and, it's a pretty good little piece about my connection with Shaw and, finding out that he had passed away and remembering how thrilled he was that he got this poster. He said, Spielberg never gave me a damn thing out of that movie. So he said, "I'm glad to have this." And it was in the Sherlock Holmes, it was in the John Shaw dedication room that they put all the things out that they could in 95 when at the university they had this program to dedicate the library. And there it was on the wall. And I thought, man, that's nice. I like that. It's beautiful.
Well, that's perfect. Really nice.
John Bennett Shaw is one of a legion of great Sherlockians that include people like his friend David Hammer, who founded Gassagene Press in the early 1980s. David's Gassagene Press published his own series of Sherlockian travel guides, William Goodrich's The New Good Old Index, and much more. David's work continues today as Gassagene Books, an imprint of our Wessex Press at wessexpress.com, where you can buy David's book, Cases of Identity, a classic text about the real people behind some of Conan Doyle's most memorable characters. In Cases of Identity, you will read about the soldiers of the Clan Murray, Caroline Otero, Prince Ferdinand of Bulgaria, Judge John Moriarty, Violet Manners, Violet Hunt, the Duke of Rutland, Surgeon Major Preston, and many more. This unique window into the world of Victorian England is available right now at wessexpress.com.
I have, I don't know where we are on this, but I'd like to mention a few people. I just cannot tell you how supportive people were in building this website and doing the Facebook page, you know. Brad Kiefhofer, I was sitting with Brad and Tim Johnson at Holmes in the Heartland in St. Louis. That's the first Sherlock thing I went to after I had retired from Southwest Airlines. I was with them for 16 years and didn't do much Sherlock Holmes stuff other than meeting someone in another city. So when I went there, Brad knew about the Facebook page. He knew I was working on a website. He brought me one of the boxes, one of John's file boxes, which the library gave away once they had all his stuff in Minnesota. And that just, I don't know, it thrilled me. You know, it was just very, very touching. Mattias Boström's book, From Holmes to Sherlock, was an incredible inspiration for me. And when he was writing that, actually, Peter Blau sent me an email and said, Hawkins, you had some encounters with Shaw, and Mattias would like to know about that. Can he send you an email and y'all discuss it? So that's where I got involved with Mattias. And we've since stayed friends. Susan Rice has been wonderful in, writing and answering everything I want. Evelyn Herzog, the lady who protested the BSI that there were no women in it and they wanted in back in 1968. She has written me. I mean, all these people, it's just been amazing. Blau sent things. Steve Rothman opened up the BSI Baker Street Journal for me to pull some items out of, and it's just been a wonderful experience for me. John Levenberg has sent stories. Stephen Doyle and Ray Betzner have both sent things that just blew me away. As young people, they were so inspired by Shaw. This is where they are now. This is why they do what they do. For one reason, because Shaw inspired them as young people. So it's been quite a journey.
One of the things that's really echoed down through the ages from John is the Shaw 100, the 100 basic books about Sherlock Holmes. Did you ever set out to acquire all those books? Did you succeed? Did you ever talk to John about that list?
Not really. Early on, I decided that I probably wouldn't be a collector. I could appreciate them, and I did come across, I don't know if you know the name Sam Weller. Sam had a marvelous bookstore in Salt Lake City, one of the cities where Southwest would take me. Duvall lived there and gave all his books to Sam Weller to sell off. And so I would go to their bookstore, and a lot of them I couldn't begin to afford. But I did buy Vincent Starrett's book on, what's the name of that title? I can't remember the name of it.
Is it The Private Life or
Baker Street?
221B?
Yeah, Private Life that's it. Private Life of Sherlock Holmes.
There you go.
It's the reprint, not the 1933 version. But Starrett had signed it in a couple of places. It was in DeWall's holdings, and I was able to get it from there. But I never set out to do the 100 books. I've got some of them, of course. I think we all do. Tim Johnson did a nice thing, and it's on the website, about the Shaw 100, sort of updated. He and I think Peter Blau put that together, realizing, and Steve Rothman and I have talked before about, can this be replicated? Can anyone ever set out again and do what Shaw did? Probably not.
Yeah.
Even though it's a lot easier because of the internet, but a lot of things have disappeared. And Shaw never had a Beatles Christmas annual. Never had one. Probably the blight of his life, right?
Yeah.
He turned one down. It was going to be $175. There's no way. So he never had it in his collection.
Yeah, we've heard from so many collectors who have had hard lessons like that, who have passed up on that thing that they've always wanted, and they thought it was overpriced at the time. And the lesson is, it always gets more expensive. So pick it up when you can, if you have little expectation of ever seeing it again.
That's right.
So, well, Jim, the way you described what I think is a community effort to help you with this website.
Absolutely.
It's completely representative of John, isn't it? I mean, he, as we said, was this Johnny Appleseed. He touched so many lives.
Yeah.
He was, if he wasn't a discerning collector, because a lot of people say he collected with all the discernment of a vacuum cleaner.
Exactly.
If that wasn't his strength was building relationships and corresponding with other Sherlockians. So it only makes sense that all these Sherlockians that you just mentioned, and by the way, I think we've interviewed every single one of them for an episode
I think so
or another. What a great representation of the Sherlockian world at large.
Well, it's just amazing. A guy like Steve Robinson, just out of the blue, sends in an hour and 35-minute video that he has of being in Shaw's house, and just trusting me with it. He said, I was thinking about selling it, but you need to put it on that site. It needs to be out there where people can see it. That's the spirit of John Shaw.
Yeah.
He didn't want to sell his off in bits and pieces to other collectors who would stack it off somewhere and you'd never see it. So that sort of spirit is alive and well, and it was just really thrilling. Now, for the website, I had a hard time deciding what platform I would use. And let's go back to Betzner once again. The guy's a genius. He was using Squarespace, and I decided I like what he's doing there. It makes sense to me, so I went with that way. And it seems to work out pretty well.
Yeah.
I would like to, could I just read about 3 sentences from Susan Rice?
Yeah, no, read all you like. Go right ahead.
Okay. She says, Dear Jim, I have just spent, nearly 2 hours reading the JBS site, and I have seldom spent a couple of hours more pleasantly. You really are making a beautiful memorial to a man so many knew and loved, but who died 25 years ago. This was written in March of 2019. And those who knew him are slowly traveling beyond the Reichenbach. It's a very handsome site, too, and the various typefaces make it seem like we're reading history, which, of course, we are. I loved his dreadful typing and was especially pleased to see you trace the exact font he used. I know in my bones it's right. It's the right one because the sight of it brought his letters immediately to mind. I thought, wow, that's as good as it gets.
That's wonderful. Wonderful testimony.
I told him, Johnson, that I wanted to find the type that Shaw used on his Smith Corona, and I wanted to find as close to what his typewriter was. They don't have it in Minneapolis, by the way. I thought surely they would. Someone sold it off, I guess. But Tim went out there and found one almost exactly like it. Sent me a picture of it.
Okay.
And so when you go to the website, you'll see that reference. And Shaw's letters that I recreated are in a special elite type font, which had to be Shaw's font. You know, I want to recreate what he was doing in New Mexico. And there's a little bit about Tulsa, which is another chapter in his life, you know, before the Tulsa days.
Yeah.
But
tell us a little bit about John's early life, because we all know him as, you know, this eminent Sherlockian, but what was John doing in real life?
He was a ne'er-do-well, actually. He ran a funeral home. I think his wife's family had that, and he was a manager for that for a while. I don't think he ever was. See, I grew up in a funeral home. This is one of the touch points that we had in our conversations. I was from Oklahoma. He had lived in Tulsa. He was a funeral director. My dad was a funeral director, and so we enjoyed that kind of thing. He had an oil drilling company. He was on the library. He was on several library boards, including Notre Dame, where he was an alumnus. And early on in his book collecting, he collected a lot of Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton books, since he was a Catholic writer, and gave all his books to Notre Dame. And Pat Shaw, who was John's son and a lawyer, he spoke to Sion last year or so, a few years ago, and talked about that his father was on the board at Notre Dame. So John was a churchman, very involved in Catholic causes. He was an oil man. And then he bought a bookstore, and he sat in the window of the bookstore in a rocker reading a book to entice people to come in and buy it. So actually, Betzner repeats a story that Vincent Starrett wrote up one time about a book that wouldn't sell, kept going down and down, and one guy had some kind of interest in it, and John immediately wrapped it up and gave it to him and said, "Please take it out of my store. It's yours." So, those kind of things happened all the time.
That's great.
So that's where Shaw came. I know that he married Dorothy Rowe Shaw either right before they moved to New Mexico in 1971 or after. I'm not sure on that, but his whole life changed at that point. 1970 was about the changing point.
That's wonderful. One of the assets that you have on the website is a toast to the best and wisest man whom I have ever known, and this was given by Peter Blau last October at the Diogenes Club of Washington, D.C. And in it, Peter mentions the Shaw Drilling Company. That was the oil concern that Shaw had, and of course, Peter being a petrochemical geologist by training, was a great connection to them. But after, just as you say, after the oil company, he owned and managed the Shaw Funeral Home, and Shaw's own explanation from the move from oil man to funeral home director was, "I couldn't get away from holes in the ground."
He was able to sum up whatever he was doing or whatever attracted him in just such a statement, you know. And so on the Facebook page and on the website, I'll put these little quotes out there every now and then, and just, you know, to show the man he was always thinking and ready to come up with a synopsis of where he was in life. Yeah, he was wonderful.
It sounds like he was just a joy to be around.
He was, absolutely. No doubt about that. He could talk for hours, but you never got tired of it, you know? I mean, there are some people, like when I was working on the airplane, I had to sit by another flight attendant. And sometimes in 5 minutes, I knew this is going to be a long, long flight. However, if you sat with John Shaw, 2 hours would go by, and he'd say, well, I've got to go now. You say, well, I just got here, you know. Just so interesting. You know, he loved life, he loved people, and he loved to share everything that he had. So I'm just hoping that the love that I had for this man and the admiration and respect comes through in this Facebook page and in the website. And I'm telling you, this little interview that we're doing today, I think will help us get more activity going at the website and the Facebook page. So we have 122 people that have joined us on the Facebook page, and how many more are coming to the website, I don't know, because they don't do Facebook. I've heard that before.
So what's your hope? I mean, if people go to the website who maybe had an interaction with John or have a memory of John, what's your hope from readers like this?
I want to forever be collecting stories about interactions with John that people had. I was amazed how many people across in England, Roger Johnson, and people in Sweden who knew John. He'd been over there, I guess, a couple of times. Japan. Everybody in the whole Sherlockian world knows about John Shaw and wants to know about it. Thierry's son, Ioannis, you know, he runs the Who's Who in Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
He lives in France, of course, and he sent me the Cagnac book, Around the World, Sherlock Holmes in 15 Years. And it's all signed by him and Cagnac and all these people. And there are 4 or 5 pages in there about Shaw. And actually, he came over here. I met him at a gala in New York. You know, the alternative dinner for the BSI dinner is the Gaslight Gala and all that. Billy Fields and I used to attend that. And he went around the country and visited with all these Sherlockians and then drew them up, you know, and put them in this book. It's a fabulous book. And so I was just amazed at how many people across the globe have stories about Shaw, and I want them to keep coming in. I do draw from the Facebook page, and I let people know, say, I'd love to put this on my website. Do you mind? And I said, no, not at all. Go ahead, you know. So I want to keep collecting the stories. I don't think they ever end about Shaw. And as you said, Peter Blau's toast to Shaw was really a sweet thing for him to send in to do that. He said, as he says in the beginning, he said, I was supposed to toast Sherlock Holmes. I never knew Sherlock Holmes. So I want to toast somebody that I knew and admired, and that's John Bennett Shaw.
That's perfect.
So that toast for him was just really, really special.
So if people have stories about John or correspondence or anything like that, how should they get in touch with you?
Well, they can send them to my email, or they can go to the Friends of John Bennett Shaw Facebook page and post them there. They would need to join up. It's absolutely free. But as I've said, a lot of people don't do Facebook, and they probably don't want to get into that. In fact, Tim Johnson used to do Facebook, and he did not like Zuckerberg's approach to life. He bailed out. So I think if they have something they would like to, just send a picture. I'm not actually getting these materials in hand. I'm getting a photograph or stories about and all that. But there's some pretty good audio things on there, too, like John Shaw interviewing Edith Meiser.
Wow.
That's in the Minnesota holdings. And, you know, anybody that wants to send anything about Holmes, about John Bennett Shaw, is welcome to and encouraged to. And my email is, I guess we'll publish it with this interview. I don't know.
Great. Well, we will put a link to all of those things, to Facebook, to the website, to your email address, as well as some of these previous episodes that we've mentioned. We'll put those all in the show notes, which again is available at ihose.co/ihose171. Jim, what a loving and comprehensive, to date, tribute you've put together for John Bennett Shaw. I think he would be mightily pleased.
Well, I appreciate that. I think he would too. And it's just been such a joy to talk about him and to get to know some of these people who really knew him much better than I did. I only got to go to one of his events, the Williamsburg, William and Mary, College of William and Mary, John Bennett Shaw weekend, who was put together. I mean, the weekend was put together by one Ray Betzner. That name keeps coming up. He was newly minted as one of the people at the school there, and had Shaw in. That's the only one I ever got to go to, but it was life-changing. So people who want to know about Shaw need to come to our website and to the Facebook page, and they'll find out about it.
Perfect. Jim, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me to share this story with you, Scott. You and Bert. Take care.
It's a unique example, not just because of the subject matter and Jim's enthusiasm and the vast amount of information that's been gathered, but it's a great example of a style, of a characteristic of a really great Sherlockian. And as you listen to this and as you listen to Jim and as you visit the website and learn more about John, one of the things to keep in mind is if you are as impressed by John Bennett Shaw as Jim has been and others have been, that the best way to reflect that is to try to incorporate some of John's characteristics yourself. John was a great sharer. Mm-hmm. He was very enthusiastic. He was not proprietary. He was a great friend, and he had a good time. He had a really good time most of the time. My memories of John from my early days at the BSI dinners and in other places, I remember what immediately impressed me about him. And I was, young and an idiot, and I'm still an idiot. So that's genetic, I guess. But what impressed me about John was, there are people that when you meet them in groups and you have a conversation, you have the sense, and some people are more obvious about it than others, that they are looking over your shoulder to find somebody more interesting to talk to.
Yeah.
That was not John. When you talk to John Bennett Shaw, he put his eyes on you, and that's where they stayed. He was genuinely interested in everybody he spoke with.
That's a wonderful trait, not only in Sherlockians, but just in leaders and in people in general. And we need more like that in the world, and certainly in the Sherlockian world. And I think, if anything, the folks that I come into contact with, for the most part, have all been inclusive and welcoming and warm and wanting to show people the ropes, because let's face it, this is a decades-long hobby, a decades-long subgenre that has been going on. And for someone just walking into it nascently in 2019, it can feel a little daunting. The names that are thrown about and the references that are almost as obscure as facts and figures in the stories themselves. I think the Sherlockian world has been around now longer than the span of time from the beginning to the end of the Sherlock Holmes stories themselves. So, it can be daunting. And having a guiding light like that, having someone who can take you under their wing, who can introduce you to people, who can take you places, who can suggest books to read, who can suggest bookstores to visit, etc., is extremely important. And the degree to which each one of us, as a time-honored Sherlockian, has the opportunity to do that for a younger person coming in, the more like John Bennett Shaw we can all be.
Yeah, I agree.
As Jim was mentioning this very special December 1990 issue of the Baker Street Journal. By the way, that's volume 40, number 4, for those of you keeping track. You may be able to find a copy here and there online. You can certainly find it through the EBSJ. But as I noted that here in my notebook, as we're taking notes about Jim's comments, I put down BSJ, December 1990, JBS, for John Bennett Shaw. I said, well, look at that, BSJ, JBS. Of course he had to be involved with Sherlock Holmes. He had the right initials.
I like that, yeah.
Well, enough from us. You don't want to hear from us anymore. You want to hear from a guy like Mattias Boström here, all the way from Sweden.
The press is a very valuable institution if one knows how to use it.
Read all about it. Telegraph! Westminster murder! Read all about it. Telegraph! Read all about it. Westminster murder!
I must make something of it, although I've no doubt that every newspaper in London will be on the street with a full and detailed account.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
This is As We Go to Press with Mattias Boström. It is always a joy to find reports from the Sherlockian societies in the newspapers. This time the random date generator gave me 18th of November 1952, and luckily there was a Sherlockian report in the Evening Sun in Baltimore on that very day. The report comes from the Six Napoleons of Baltimore, a society that celebrated their 70th anniversary just a few years ago. And through the years, the Evening Sun has often reported on their activities. On this day in November 1952, the Evening Sun columnist John Goodspeed wrote about them in his Mr. Pepys diary. He says that the latest thing from the Six Napoleons is research to prove that Sherlock Holmes worked and failed on the Lizzie Borden murder case around 1892. The theory came from the lawyer Alan Robertson, the founder of the Six Napoleons. Robertson thought that Holmes, during the Great Hiatus, was snooping around Fall River, Massachusetts, interested in the Borden axe killing. Robertson had even tracked down a relative of Sherlock Holmes, just 4 miles from the murder scene. And then there were at least 3 interesting connections between the Holmes stories and the Borden case. Miss Borden burnt a blue dress, and a blue dress figured in the Copper Beaches. An undiscovered note figured in the Borden case, and there was a note in a dressing gown in the Reigate puzzle. And finally, there were no footprints in the sand of the barn floor. And in the Golden Pince Knee, Sherlock Holmes spread ashes on the floor to pick up a murderer's footprints. Alan Robertson figured Holmes learned these coincidental methods from his private eye work on the New England murder. Miss Borden was acquitted, so Holmes failed, according to Mr. Robertson. He never mentioned the job to Dr. Watson. Personally, I think that Alan Robertson's proofs weren't watertight, but I'm so happy that they ended up in the newspaper.
You know, I really shouldn't be surprised because Mattias Boström is like the modern-day John Bennett Shaw with respect to newspaper clippings. He's able to find something somewhere every time involving Sherlock Holmes and a date out of the past. It's amazing. Well, if you like the sounds of that tune, that means it's time for everyone's favorite Sherlockian quiz show. That's right, it's Canonical Couplets. This is the time when we throw out a 2-line poem representative of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and if you throw in a guess that's correct as to what story that is, and we pick your name from random, we send you a prize, and everyone loves prizes. So, in the last episode, you heard us say this. To shear one's locks and wear that shade of blue turned out to be a risky thing to do. Bert, do you know what Sherlock Holmes adventure this couplet refers to?
Yes, that great automotive tale, The Blue Carburetor.
I am constantly astounded at your ability to add malapropisms into each and every episode.
I think the issue here is that the stories I imagine I'm reading outweigh the impact of the stories we actually have.
Oh, well, you're as usual, you're very close. In this case, it was the adventure of Copper Beaches. It wasn't the Blue Carbuncle at all. It was the Copper Beaches. The Copper Beaches. And let's go into the revolving drum here and give it a spin. Watching it roll around there among all of the correct answers, and it lands on lucky number 15. And why, that belongs to Tim Collins. Tim, congratulations. We will be in touch to get your address and make sure you get a prize from the vaults. And now, it is time for this week's Canonical Couplet, and it is... A horrid scandal's very apt to dawn, with public property at private pawn. If you think you know the answer to this canonical couplet, send it to us via email at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. Put canonical couplet in the subject line, and if we choose your name from among the correct answers, you win. Good luck.
I'm going to get it right next time, I bet.
You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. Well, how is it that you've frittered away another hour or so with us, whiling away in the audio confines of John Bennett Shaw's library? Not a bad place to be.
Not a bad place to be at all. You lucky, happy people.
I know. And we will be back in 15 days' time with another episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, with someone who's going to tell us their very own personal tale about their involvement with Sherlock Holmes. And until then, I remain the tailing personal Scott Monty.
And I remain the trending and late as usual Bert Wolder.
And together, we say, The game's afoot.
The game's afoot.
I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.